I stared at my phone screen, my hands shaking as I zoomed in on the photo my cousin had just sent me. There was Uncle Jareth, champagne glass raised high, surrounded by laughing people in designer swimwear on the deck of a massive yacht. The timestamp showed it was taken just 2 hours ago. 2 hours ago, while Aunt Maribel lay unconscious in the ICU, fighting for her life after her sudden heart attack, while our entire family sat in that sterile waiting room, praying she'd make it through the night. He was celebrating with strangers. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the woman pressed against his side, wearing Aunt Maribel's anniversary necklace, the one she never took off. Before I tell you what happened next, can you tell me where in the world you're listening from? The call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I know the exact time because I was staring at my alarm clock, wondering if I should just give up on sleep and start my morning routine early. When my phone buzzed with Aunt Maribel's contact photo, that beautiful smile of hers from last Christmas, I felt my stomach drop. She never called this late. Never. My aunt was the type of person who apologized for texting after 8 p.m., always worried about disturbing someone's evening routine. I fumbled for the phone, my voice thick with sleep when I answered, but it wasn't Aunt Maribel on the other end. It was a paramedic, his voice professional but gentle, asking if I was related to Maribel Chen Rodriguez. The words hit me like ice water. Massive heart attack, unresponsive, Mary's hospital, come immediately. I threw on clothes without thinking, grabbed my keys and ran to my car. The 20-minute drive to the hospital felt like hours, every red light an eternity. I kept calling Uncle Jareth, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Then I called my cousin Boone, Aunt Maribel's son, but he was 3 states away for work. The panic in his voice when I told him what happened made my chest tight. He was booking the first flight home, but it would be hours before he could get there. I was the only family member who lived close enough to be there for her immediately. The responsibility felt crushing. As I pulled into the hospital parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly, I could barely turn off the engine. The emergency room entrance loomed ahead of me, those automatic doors like the gateway to a nightmare I wasn't ready to face. Inside the hospital, everything was chaos and sterile brightness. The nurse at the front desk looked tired, her scrubs wrinkled from a long shift, but her eyes softened when I explained who I was there. She led me through a maze of corridors that smelled like disinfectant and desperation, past rooms where other families were living through their own worst nights. When we reached the ICU, she paused outside a room with the curtains drawn. "She's stable for now," the nurse said quietly, "but the next 24 hours are critical. The doctor will want to speak with you and her husband about treatment options." I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed her inside. Seeing Aunt Maribel lying there, surrounded by machines that beeped and whirred, tubes and wires connecting her to life itself, broke something inside me. This woman who had raised me after my parents died, who had never missed a birthday or graduation, who made the world's best tamales and gave the warmest hugs, looked so small and fragile in that hospital bed. The doctor arrived 20 minutes later, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Dr. Reeves," she introduced herself, and I immediately trusted her steady presence. She explained the situation in terms I could understand. Aunt Maribel had suffered a widowmaker heart attack, the kind that kills most people before they even reach the hospital. The paramedics had performed CPR for 12 minutes before getting her heart beating again, but the lack of oxygen had caused some damage. They wouldn't know the full extent until she woke up, if she woke up. The word "if" hung in the air between us like a sword. Dr. Reeves needed to discuss treatment options with the immediate family, and asked where Aunt Maribel's husband was. I tried calling Uncle Jareth again, but it went straight to voicemail. He's probably on his way," I lied, because I didn't know what else to say. For the next 6 hours, I sat beside Aunt Maribel's bed, holding her hand, and talking to her like she could hear me. I told her about my new job, about the guy I'd been dating, about how her favorite soap opera had killed off the main character. Stupid, normal things that felt important somehow. The nurses came and went, checking monitors and adjusting medications, their soft-soled shoes squeaking against the linoleum floor. Other family members began trickling in. Aunt Maribel's sister Luz drove down from Sacramento, her teenage daughters in tow, Uncle Jareth's brother Deacon showed up around noon, bringing coffee and sandwiches nobody wanted to eat. But still no Uncle Jareth. When people asked where he was, I made excuses. I didn't believe myself. He was probably stuck in traffic. His phone battery probably died. He was probably just scared and dealing with it in his own way. But deep down something felt wrong. It was Luz who first voiced what we were all thinking. "Where the hell is my brother-in-law?" she asked, her voice sharp with worry and exhaustion. We'd been at the hospital for almost 12 hours, and Uncle Jareth hadn't shown up, hadn't called, hadn't even responded to the dozens of messages and voicemails we'd left. Deacon tried to defend his brother, suggesting maybe he was handling business matters or making arrangements for time off work. But even he looked uncomfortable as the hours stretched on. Aunt Maribel's condition remained critical but stable, the machines keeping her alive while her body fought to recover from the trauma. The waiting room became our temporary home, filled with family members, church friends, and neighbors who loved Aunt Maribel. Everyone brought food, flowers, and prayers, but the one person who should have been there, who should have been sitting beside his wife's hospital bed, was nowhere to be found. By evening, my cousin Boone finally arrived from Denver, his face pale and his hands shaking from exhaustion and grief. He'd caught the first flight he could find, barely pausing to pack a bag. When he saw his mother lying unconscious in that hospital bed, he broke down completely. I held him while he sobbed, feeling helpless and furious at the same time. Furious at the situation, at the unfairness of it all, and increasingly furious at Uncle Jareth for his absence. Boone kept asking where his stepfather was, and I had to admit I didn't know. We'd been calling him for 18 hours straight with no response. That's when Boone did something that changed everything. He pulled out his phone and opened an app I didn't recognize. "Find my friends," he explained. "Mom made us all share our locations after Grandpa got lost that one time." His fingers trembled as he searched for Uncle Jareth's name. When the location popped up, we both stared at the screen in shock. According to his phone's GPS, Uncle Jareth was at Monterey Bay Marina, 40 miles away. The drive to the marina was silent except for the sound of Boone's angry breathing. I'd insisted on coming with him, partly because I was worried about what he might do, and partly because I needed to see this for myself. The marina at sunset was beautiful in a way that felt obscene given the circumstances: golden light dancing on the water, expensive boats bobbing gently in their slips, well-dressed people enjoying cocktails on deck. We found Uncle Jareth's location easily enough. The tracking app led us right to a massive white yacht called Easy Living. The sound of laughter and music drifted across the water, and my stomach churned with disbelief. Through the yacht's windows, we could see people in summer clothes, drinks in hand, having what looked like a fantastic time. And there, visible through the main cabin window, was Uncle Jareth himself. He was wearing a Hawaiian shirt I'd never seen before, his arm around a blonde woman in a bikini and cover-up, both of them laughing at something on her phone. The woman was young, maybe in her 30s, with the kind of effortless beauty that comes from money and leisure. But what made my blood turn to ice was the necklace she was wearing. Aunt Maribel's anniversary necklace, the white gold pendant with the sapphire that Uncle Jareth had given her for their 15th wedding anniversary. The necklace she never ever took off. I took photos. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady, but I managed to capture clear images of Uncle Jareth and this woman, laughing and drinking while his wife fought for her life in intensive care. Boone stood beside me, his fists clenched, his face a mask of rage I'd never seen before. "We should go down there," he whispered, but I grabbed his arm. "Not yet," I said. "We need to think about this." Because as furious as I was, as much as I wanted to march onto that yacht and scream at Uncle Jareth, I knew we needed evidence. We needed to understand exactly what we were dealing with before we acted. So we sat in my car in the marina parking lot, and I started making phone calls, first to Luz, to tell her where we'd found him. Her reaction was a string of Spanish curse words I'd never heard her use before. Then to other family members, sharing the photos, watching the shock and anger ripple through our family text chain. But most importantly, I called someone Uncle Jareth didn't know I knew, his business partner, Craig. Craig Emerson had worked with Uncle Jareth for 15 years, and I'd met him at several family gatherings over the years. He was a straight-talking guy who'd always been kind to me, And I had his number from when I'd helped Aunt Maribel plan Uncle Jareth's surprise birthday party 2 years ago. When I called him that evening, pretending I needed to reach Uncle Jareth for a family emergency but couldn't get through on his regular phone, Craig's response surprised me. "Family emergency?" he repeated, confusion clear in his voice. "But Jareth's been planning this weekend for months. Said it was a business retreat with some potential investors from San Francisco. High-stakes stuff, very confidential." My heart sank. "This weekend?" I asked. "Yeah, left Thursday morning. Won't be back until Monday." Said his wife was visiting her sister in Phoenix and it was the perfect time for an intensive business meeting. The lies were so smooth, so detailed, that it was clear this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This had been planned. While Aunt Maribel was cooking his favorite meals and making sure his shirts were pressed for his business trip, he was planning a romantic getaway with another woman. I hung up with Craig and immediately called our family's insurance agent, Mrs. Patterson. She'd been handling Uncle Jareth and Aunt Maribel's policies for over a decade, and she knew me well enough to take my call on a Saturday evening. I told her about Aunt Maribel's heart attack, about the mounting medical bills we were facing, and asked about their coverage. What she told me made my stomach turn. "Oh honey," she said, her voice heavy with concern, "I'm so sorry to hear about Maribel. But I have to tell you there might be some issues with the medical coverage. Jareth called me 3 weeks ago about making some changes to their policy, reduced the coverage limits, changed some beneficiaries, said they were downsizing to save money for retirement." 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks before Aunt Maribel's heart attack, Uncle Jareth had reduced her medical coverage. The timing felt like more than a coincidence, especially given what we'd discovered about his whereabouts. Mrs. Patterson promised to send me all the paperwork first thing Monday morning, but the damage was already clear. Aunt Maribel's medical bills were going to be astronomical, and her coverage had been deliberately compromised. Boone and I drove back to the hospital in stunned silence, both of us trying to process what we'd learned. The ICU waiting room was fuller now, packed with people who loved Aunt Maribel and wanted to support our family through this crisis. Church members had brought homemade food, neighbors had sent flowers, and Aunt Maribel's co-workers from the school where she taught 3rd grade had created a meal train to help us through the coming weeks. The outpouring of love was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. These people, many of whom weren't even related to us, were doing more to support our family than Uncle Jareth was. When people asked where he was, we'd run out of excuses. Luz looked at me expectantly, knowing I had information the rest of the family didn't. I pulled her aside and showed her the photos from the marina. Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. "That son of a bitch," she hissed, loud enough that several people turned to look. "That absolute piece of shit." The news spread through the waiting room like wildfire, family members clustering around my phone to see the evidence for themselves. Dr. Reeves appeared around 10 p.m. with an update on Aunt Maribel's condition. "The next 24 hours were still critical," she explained, "but there were encouraging signs. Aunt Maribel's brain activity looked good on the monitors, and her heart rhythm was stabilizing. However, she would need additional procedures, possibly including surgery to install a pacemaker, and the recovery would be long and expensive." Dr. Reeves also mentioned that they'd been trying to reach Aunt Maribel's husband to discuss the treatment plan and get his consent for certain procedures. "Is there another way to contact him?" she asked. "Some of these decisions really need to be made by her spouse." The room fell silent. Luz stepped forward, her jaw set with determination. "Doctor, there's something you need to know about my sister's husband," she began, and then she told Dr. Reeves everything. About Uncle Jareth's disappearance, about the yacht, about the insurance changes. Dr. Reeves listened with the professional composure of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama, but I could see the disgust in her eyes. That night, while half our family kept vigil at the hospital and the other half went home to get some rest, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the uncomfortable waiting room chair, watching Aunt Maribel's chest rise and fall through the window of her ICU room, and I started putting pieces together. The business trip that coincided with her supposed visit to Phoenix, a trip she'd never mentioned to anyone, the insurance changes 3 weeks ago, the expensive necklace he'd given another woman, the yacht rental that must have cost thousands of dollars. I thought about all the times in recent months when Uncle Jareth had seemed distracted, when he'd work late or take mysterious phone calls. I thought about how he'd been encouraging Aunt Maribel to take a break from her teaching job, telling her they could afford for her to retire early. Was he planning to leave her? Had he been systematically preparing for a life without her, only to have his plans interrupted by her sudden medical crisis? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. This wasn't just infidelity. This was financial abuse, emotional abandonment, and betrayal of the cruelest kind. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Is this Calla? This is Opal Morrison. I think we need to talk." My blood ran cold. Somehow, this woman knew who I was and had gotten my phone number. I stepped outside into the hospital parking lot to call her back, not wanting to have this conversation where other family members could overhear. Opal's voice was younger than I'd expected, with a slight southern accent and a tone that was equal parts nervous and defensive. "I saw the photos circulating on social media," she said. "Photos of me and Jareth. I wanted you to know that he told me his wife had died 6 months ago from cancer. He said he was finally ready to move on with his life, to find happiness again." The lies were so elaborate, so detailed, that I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "He's been planning to leave her anyway," Opal continued. "He told me their marriage had been over for years, that they were just staying together for financial reasons until they could figure out the divorce." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Opal," I said, "his wife didn't die from cancer. She's in intensive care right now, fighting for her life. He's been lying to you." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for so long I thought she might have hung up. When Opal finally spoke, her voice was small and shaken. "That's not possible," she whispered. "We've been together for 8 months. He introduced me to his friends, his business partners. He's been talking about us getting married, about starting fresh somewhere new." 8 months. Uncle Jareth had been having an affair for 8 months, building an entire alternate life with this woman while maintaining his marriage to Aunt Maribel. "He bought me this necklace for our 6-month anniversary," Opal continued, "said it was a family heirloom he wanted me to have." My anger flared white-hot. "That necklace belongs to his wife," I said through gritted teeth. "It was her anniversary gift. She's worn it every day for 5 years. The sound of Opal crying came through the phone, and despite everything, I felt a stab of sympathy for her. She was a victim in this too, manipulated and lied to just like the rest of us. But unlike us, she had something we needed. "Opal," I said carefully, "I need you to help me. Help us. If you really didn't know about his wife, if you were deceived too, then help us make this right." She agreed to meet me the next morning, and as I hung up the phone, I realized that Uncle Jareth's carefully constructed web of lies was about to come crashing down around him. Opal Morrison was nothing like I'd expected. When she walked into the hospital coffee shop at 9 a.m. sharp, I was surprised to see a woman who looked more like a kindergarten teacher than a homewrecker. She was pretty in a wholesome girl-next-door way, wearing jeans and a simple blouse, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The expensive necklace, Aunt Maribel's necklace, hung around her neck, catching the morning light filtering through the coffee shop windows. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands shook slightly as she sat down across from me. "I brought everything," she said quietly, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "Photos, text messages, receipts, emails, all of it." The envelope contained 8 months of documentation of Uncle Jareth's double life, romantic dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to wine country, intimate text messages where he professed his love and talked about their future together. But what shocked me most were the financial documents. Credit card statements showing thousands of dollars in charges for jewelry, clothes, and hotel rooms, bank transfers to an account I didn't recognize, and most damning of all, a real estate listing for a condo in Santa Barbara with a note in Uncle Jareth's handwriting: "Our new beginning, closing next month." He said he'd been saving for years to start over, Opal explained, tears streaming down her face. "He showed me the condo listing, said we'd move there after his divorce was finalized, said his wife was going to get the house and half his retirement, but he'd hidden enough money to give us a fresh start." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Uncle Jareth hadn't just been having an affair, he'd been systematically moving money out of joint accounts, reducing insurance coverage, and planning to abandon Aunt Maribel while she was at her most vulnerable. The condo purchase, the reduced medical coverage, the elaborate lies to his mistress. It all pointed to a man who'd been planning his exit strategy for months. There's more, Opal said, pulling out her phone. He's been texting me all morning wondering why I haven't responded to his calls. He doesn't know that I know the truth. She showed me the messages, each one more manipulative than the last. Uncle Jareth was painting himself as the victim, claiming his dead wife's family was causing problems, that jealous relatives were spreading lies about him. Reading his words made my stomach turn with disgust. I asked Opal to do something that took incredible courage: confront Uncle Jareth while recording the conversation. She agreed, but only if I was there as backup. We drove to the marina together, my cousin Boone following in his rental car. The yacht was still there, though fewer people were on deck in the harsh light of day. Uncle Jareth appeared at the railing when Opal called out to him, his face lighting up with a smile that made me sick to my stomach. He helped her aboard, chattering about what a wonderful time he'd been having with his business colleagues, completely oblivious to what was coming. I stayed hidden on the dock, my phone recording everything through the yacht's open windows. Jareth, Opal said, her voice steadier than I'd expected, I need to ask you about your wife. The change in his demeanor was immediate and telling. His smile disappeared, replaced by a look of confusion and growing alarm. My wife? He repeated. Honey, you know my wife died from cancer. Why would you bring that up now? That's when Opal played her hand. She pulled out her phone and showed him the photos I'd taken the night before. Pictures of Aunt Maribel in her hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. This is your wife, Jareth. This is Maribel. She's not dead. She's in intensive care at St. Mary's Hospital, fighting for her life after a massive heart attack. And you've been here, with me, while her family sits in that waiting room wondering where the hell you are. The color drained from Uncle Jareth's face so quickly I thought he might faint. He stumbled backward, gripping the yacht's railing for support. That's impossible, he stammered. Maribel is visiting her sister in Phoenix. She's fine. This is some kind of mistake. But Opal wasn't finished. She held up the necklace he'd given her, Aunt Maribel's anniversary necklace. You gave me this and told me it was a family heirloom. But it belongs to your very much alive wife, doesn't it? You stole it from her jewelry box before you came on this trip. The lies were crumbling around him, and I could see Uncle Jareth's mind racing, trying to find a way out of the trap he'd built for himself. You have to understand, Uncle Jareth began, his voice taking on a pleading tone. Maribel and I, our marriage has been over for years. We've just been going through the motions. I was going to tell her about you after the divorce was final. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Opal stepped back from him, disgust clear on her face. She's in intensive care, Jareth. She might die. And instead of being with her, instead of holding her hand and praying she makes it through, you're here with me, lying about everything. What kind of man does that? The recording captured everything. His desperate attempts to justify his actions, his complete lack of remorse for abandoning his wife in her hour of greatest need, his anger when he realized his carefully constructed lies had been exposed. When Opal removed the necklace and threw it at his feet, Uncle Jareth's mask finally slipped completely. You stupid bitch, he snarled, all pretense of charm gone. You have no idea what you've done. I've been planning this for months. Do you know how much money I've spent setting this up? The admission was caught on recording, evidence of his premeditated betrayal that would prove invaluable in the coming legal battles. Boone and I confronted Uncle Jareth as he tried to leave the marina. The look on his face when he saw us was priceless. Shock, guilt, and rage all mixed together. This is not what it looks like, he started, but Boone cut him off. We have recordings, Uncle Jareth. We have financial documents. We know about the condo, the insurance changes, all of it. For a moment I thought Uncle Jareth might try to run, but instead he deflated like a punctured balloon. The drive back to the hospital was tense and silent, Uncle Jareth following us in his BMW like a man driving to his own execution. At the hospital, the confrontation with the rest of the family was explosive. Luz screamed at him in both English and Spanish, calling him every name in the book. Other family members had to physically restrain Boone from attacking his stepfather. But the moment that broke everyone's heart was when Dr. Reeves allowed Uncle Jareth to see Aunt Maribel, hoping that seeing his wife's condition might shock him into doing the right thing. Instead, he stood in the doorway of her ICU room for less than 30 seconds before walking away, mumbling something about needing to sort out the insurance situation. The next morning brought the miracle we'd all been praying for. Aunt Maribel's eyes opened. Her first word was Jareth, and the hope in her voice when she said his name shattered what was left of our hearts. I was the one holding her hand when she woke up, and I had to make a split-second decision about what to tell her. Looking into her eyes, seeing the love and trust there, I couldn't bring myself to destroy her with the truth immediately. "He's here," I lied. "He's been here the whole time. He loves you so much." It wasn't entirely false. Uncle Jareth was in the building, though he was downstairs in the hospital administrator's office arguing about insurance coverage and trying to avoid financial responsibility for her care. Dr. Reeves had quietly informed us that without Uncle Jareth's cooperation and signature on various forms, Aunt Maribel's treatment options would be severely limited. But we'd been preparing for this possibility. Our family had hired a lawyer, and with Opal's testimony and the recordings we'd made, we had enough evidence to petition for emergency guardianship, removing Uncle Jareth's legal authority to make medical decisions for his wife. The legal proceedings moved quickly, expedited, because of Aunt Maribel's critical condition. Within 48 hours, the court had granted temporary guardianship to Luz, removing Uncle Jareth's authority to make medical or financial decisions on his wife's behalf. The evidence was overwhelming. The recorded confession, the financial documents showing his attempts to hide marital assets, witness testimony from family members about his abandonment during her medical crisis. Uncle Jareth's lawyer advised him to cooperate, pointing out that fighting the guardianship would only result in more evidence of his misconduct being entered into public record. The insurance company, faced with proof that Uncle Jareth had fraudulently reduced coverage while planning to abandon his wife, restored Aunt Maribel's full benefits and covered all her medical expenses retroactively. The real estate deal for the Santa Barbara condo fell through when the bank froze Uncle Jareth's access to joint marital funds. His carefully planned escape route had become a legal nightmare. 3 weeks later, Aunt Maribel was strong enough to hear the truth. I sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand as I explained everything. Uncle Jareth's affair, his financial betrayal, his absence during her medical crisis, his plans to abandon her. She listened in silence, tears streaming down her face, but her grip on my hand never wavered. "I wondered why he'd been so distant," she whispered finally. "Why he kept encouraging me to quit my job. Why he'd changed our insurance. I thought he was trying to take care of me, planning for our retirement." The heartbreak in her voice was devastating, but underneath it was something else. "Steele, what happens now?" she asked. I smiled through my own tears. "Now you get better. Now you heal. Now you let people who really love you take care of you." The divorce papers were filed the following week. Uncle Jareth, faced with overwhelming evidence of his misconduct, didn't contest the proceedings. Aunt Maribel received everything: the house, his retirement accounts, alimony, and a substantial settlement for emotional distress. More importantly, she was surrounded by family who loved her, friends who supported her, and a community that rallied around her during her recovery. 6 months later, Aunt Maribel moved back home to the house she'd shared with Uncle Jareth for 15 years. But she transformed it completely, redecorating with bright colors and filling it with photos of family and friends who had stood by her during the darkest period of her life. Her recovery was remarkable. The pacemaker kept her heart steady, physical therapy restored her strength, and counseling helped her process the emotional trauma of her husband's betrayal. Uncle Jareth moved to a studio apartment across town, his dreams of a new life in Santa Barbara destroyed along with his reputation. Opal, to her credit, had cooperated fully with our lawyer and had been instrumental in recovering the stolen money and jewelry. She'd also started dating Craig, Uncle Jareth's former business partner, who had dissolved their partnership immediately after learning about the betrayal. "Karma," Aunt Maribel said with a laugh when I told her about Opal and Craig's new relationship. "That woman deserves happiness with someone who'll be honest with her." As for me, I learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up when your world is falling apart, who sits with you in hospital waiting rooms, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Uncle Jareth chose a yacht and a lie over the woman who'd loved him faithfully for 15 years. But Aunt Maribel chose forgiveness, healing, and the family who chose her right back. And that made all the difference.